Hi everybody and welcome to the CNBC Africa special. We are coming to you from Ilovo at the South African Institute of Chartered Accountants offices. The reason we are here obviously is to discuss the biggest elephant in South Africa's room right now, and what that is exactly what will happen to Steinhoff and how will the industry respond to Steinhoff and the directors implicated in South Africa's biggest fraud yet. Will people go to jail? Will people lose their licenses? We are here to find that out. I am in conversation with SAICA CEO Freeman Nomvalo. Freeman, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Sophie.
Again, Steinhoff is something that is not going to go away until something is actually done to the people that lost shareholders a lot of money, that lost pensioners a lot of money. Help us understand, as SAICA, your role that you are playing in helping to clean up the process that was Steinhoff.
Yes, Fifi. SAICA obviously has a role to play in this matter, and that role is to the extent that some of the people involved in the Steinhoff saga are members of SAICA. And that role is about disciplining. The CEO, for instance, Marcus Jooste is a member of SAICA, Ben Lefranche is a member of SAICA. And those two individuals, to the extent that they have violated the Code of Professional Conduct, SAICA has to discipline them. And depending on the gravity of the infraction, fine them and even remove them as members of SAICA.
All right, so knowing what you know now about what they are alleged to have done, because everyone is, they say, innocent until proven guilty in the court of law in South Africa's sense, but we have had a deep forensic report done by a PwC revealing the fact that fraudulent transactions were done, shelf companies were created, good accounting practices were not adhered to. So in terms of what we know, what they have done, what is the severity or the likely severity of their actions right now?
Look, the specifics obviously in the case one would not deal with that, but to the extent that all of those actions that they have done are found to be wanting in relation to what is expected of an accountant, they would have to be brought before a disciplinary committee, and that committee will evaluate that information and come to a conclusion onto the guilt of the specific individuals and impose a sanction. Now, the allegations are quite serious. Mm-hmm. The extent to which that attaches to these individuals and is in fact likely to result in a particular sanction has to be tested in a disciplinary process, and that is the process that is yet to be undertaken by SAICA.
All right, why? Is SAICA dragging its feet here?
Not really. SAICA has to have evidence to put before a disciplinary tribunal, and that process has been undertaken by SAICA. You made reference to the PwC report. We don't have access to the PwC report as of today. We have requested from Steinhoff to have access to that report. We haven't received positive feedback from that.
What did they say?
In fact, when we followed up, because we've recently followed up on that, they claimed that they did not receive our initial request. We've now communicating through our lawyers to their lawyers, and we hope that they will do the right thing.
So as it stands right now, as SAICA members, Marcus Jooste and Ben Lefranche can still, engage in regular accounting activity.
They can still use the designation CASA, and until such time that process is concluded. I'm constrained to make reference to this because we don't have that ability yet in South Africa. That in my roadshow, a lot of members and a number of other stakeholders like BUSA, BLSA, and other stakeholders in the country are asking the question, why is it that a person can continue to use the designation when so much has been done to damage the reputation of the profession? Unfortunately, our governance processes at the moment do not allow us to suspend. Other institutes elsewhere in the world are able to do so. if we are to go down that route, we need to amend our bylaws so that we have that power. So yes, there has been a huge cry communicated to me by members. There has been a huge cry communicated to me by other stakeholders that we ought to consider that, but it is not a measure that we have in our arsenal at the moment.
I mean, because I imagine those bylaws, when they were written, it was at a different time, many years ago, when things like this, like a Steinhoff perhaps, wasn't in South Africa's present.
Yes.
Because isn't it time now, as a result of this happening, for those bylaws to be relooked at? Because it doesn't seem right, particularly for an average South African who is looking at somebody who cost them quite a lot in their pension money, looking at that person continue to walk scot-free as if nothing happened.
Yes. Obviously, nobody can be presumed guilty, and the suspension doesn't presume anyone to be guilty in any way.
Sure, but would it not also prevent that person from not being able to pursue or call themselves a CA and get jobs and continue to get money?
Oh yes, it would. It would do that. The first and foremost, yes, the bylaws were written at a particular time, and the bylaws have to be reviewed on a regular basis, and the bylaws are subject of review as we speak. Now, the board of SAICA, in response to this matter, decided to look holistically at the governance regime of SAICA. There's a team that was led by Roy Anderson, and they've submitted a report to the board, and the contents of that report will be reported to the members in the AGM, and the members will have to vote on certain changes that have to come into being. So there are changes that are coming, but the issue of suspension was an issue that had to fall in a second phase post the first review. Members are understandably impatient, and members are wanting this issue to be dealt with and dealt with quicker. Hopefully, there will be sufficient in the report to enable the board at least to consider what are the steps to be taken in this regard, because the only party that has got power to change the regulations is the board. So the matter is being considered. Whether we'll have a decision or not depends on two things. The first one is what the members' attitude and how the members are giving effect to the attitude. They have approached me and said this issue must be dealt with. But then I think members have got to also influence that the coming AGM does consider this matter.
When is that?
If it's in June, towards the end of June, 26th of June. Now, if the members' commitment to the issue is as expressed to me during the roadshow, I think that ought to be the next step the members take. Then the next issue is that, subject to what then the members do, the board would then have to amend the bylaws, and that process shouldn't be a long process. Now, in arriving at that decision, the board has got to consider what are the risks associated with that decision. Under what circumstances would suspensions be warranted, if at all? So all of those things would have to be the issues that are considered, so that, because this is, I think, even in jurisdictions where it's being used, this would be an extreme measure. It would have to be exercised with caution and exercised in those circumstances where public interest demand that it be exercised. So I wouldn't, like the Steinhoff matter, the VBS matter, the issues that happened at ESCOM and so on. So in those cases that are really, really of huge public interest, I think it is a matter that ought to be considered. But I don't think it is a matter that has to be done in every case that comes before SAICA.
I mean, it's sad that you had so many examples to list when we are talking about, accounting practices that didn't go the right way. VBS, we've got ESCOM, we've got Transnet, and of course we've got KPMG speaking into this whole narrative of state capture. I'd like to single out VBS because there's a view out there in the public that the way in which SAICA handled the VBS matter was very swift. If you look at the action that you took against the VBS chair, why not the same approach when it comes to a player like Steinhoff?
Well, that was an easy matter to deal with because the person was sequestrated, and that's very clear in our governance processes that we deal with that matter on that basis. On the other matters, you don't have that gift, so to speak. I'm not sure if the right way to express it, of a sequestration. You've got to have evidence, present that evidence, and have that evidence stands the test of interrogation by that person's representatives in order to arrive at a conclusion, and that's a very different ball game to that matter. VBS matter had nothing to do with the individuals concerned, except the fact that they were sequestrated.
Have you, as SAICA, been in touch with Ben or Marcus since the revelations of the accounting fraud first dropped?
Our approach is to first get the facts on our side and confront them with the facts. So in any investigation, and again, I'm not going to share everything that we've done and not done in this particular case because we don't want to deal with this. But we need to have information. Once we have the information, confront the individuals with that information and continue with the process. So I've indicated already that, for instance, one of the critical pieces of information here is the PwC report, which we don't have access to. And that report will provide a lot more credible and information that has been tested already than, for instance, reading Rob Rose's book.
Sure.
While there's a lot of very useful information in the book, presenting just the book in the disciplinary hearing would not help.
So you believe that the synthesized PwC report that most of us have seen and have got
and other evidence
is not enough to stand any test in court? You'd need everything.
For me to judge the PwC report, I must have access to it.
All right.
So I'm saying I don't have access to the PwC report. If I have access to the PwC report, I can then say, okay, I can take the matter to the next step. I don't have access to it. I need to have that access. I've requested for that information, and we've engaged our lawyers to find ways in which we can lay our hands on that information. Just at a belief, we believe that that will provide probably the best set of information yet on the matter.
I mean, what about the Steinhoff's own 2017 financial?
The financial statements is going to help us, but those financial statements have only come out recently.
Yeah.
And the process of going through those financial statements, understanding what happened from the financial statements is underway. And once that is done, we'll present that to our disciplinary tribunal.
Well, I think many people understand. I mean, that annual report, some 329 pages, a lot of things to get through. But,
yes.
You know, just as we wrap up Steinhoff specifically for now, what is the toughest sanction or the toughest sentence that Marcus Jooste or a Ben Lagrange could get in the event that the evidence that once you get it, it actually proves that these guys did commit the fraud, these guys did break your laws as SAICA members? Well,
is to lose your prestigious designation, CASA. That is the toughest sentence. You can't practice as a CA. But in terms of our bylaws and so on, financially, there is a specified up to 500,000 rands, but with a caveat that says that if the disciplinary committee so determines, that could be much higher than that.
Okay.
So the highest issue is that you would lose your right to practice as a CASA.
Is that only in South Africa? As in, if he wanted to go to Frankfurt, he'd still be able to?
No, you can't use the CASA designation.
Right.
So to the extent that your appeal to the market is on the back of you being a chartered accountant in South Africa, you can't use that designation. It is a well-recognized designation, and you can't use it.
Freeman, excuse me there. Help us understand your investigators and your process. We're trying to understand the capacity of your team. I mean, what does that look like? How are you guys even funding this? Because I imagine it's quite a costly exercise.
Well, these matters are costly. But we have a team, and obviously we have option to source in capacity from outside when we need to. The Ntsebeza inquiry was one such matter where we brought in people from outside to assist SAICA. So the capacity is there internally, but also we can get that capacity from the market when we need to. Now, funding that obviously is an issue. Good standing members that are doing everything to uphold the values of this profession, unfortunately have to finance these activities in defense and in ensuring that we retain and maintain the integrity of the profession.
That integrity of the profession, it has lost a lot. And yes. I recall reading from quotes when you were appointed to say that one of the things that you wanted to do is restore it.
Yes.
It's around 6 months into your appointment so far, I think. Four, right. How's that process going?
Well, it's an ongoing process. I don't think it would happen instantly. But the work that SAICA is doing in relation to reviewing the governance processes, the issue we've just discussed around whether we are able to suspend people in cases where there are high public interest matters, those decisions would help a great deal. But there's a whole host of other activities that we've got to do. We've got to continue to make sure that our training programs are robust. Our training programs are up there with the rest of in the world. They take into account the complexity of the business environment that we're in. The Code of Professional Conduct has recently been reviewed. Both ourselves and ERBA are going to be implementing that new code in June, from the 15th of June onwards. And all of those projects and initiatives got to continue. We've got to continue to make sure that all of the things that have put us on top of the world as a profession here in South Africa continue to be done, and they continue to be innovated and improved.
I'm actually glad that
those things are absolutely critical.
For sure. I'm glad that you raised ERBA, because my next question was going to be understanding the kind of working relationship that you and ERBA have, and especially when it comes to dealing with very difficult and complex matters like your Steinhoff, like your VBS, like Eskom, and even Transnet.
Yes, we have a very good relationship with ERBA, at least institution to institution. Obviously, there are overlaps in the things that we do. As a matter of fact, the meeting I had before this...
with Bernard. We saw
with
him
Bernard,
outside,
yes. So you saw Bernard leaving our premises. So that's an indication. We meet quarterly. Okay. And in between those quarterly meetings, we have conversations. They have just done work in relation to the inspections of auditing firms. They've presented us with the report, and they've in fact shared the report with us, and they will be coming to present the report to us. And we're looking into all of those matters so that we can see where there are shortcomings and address those shortcomings from our side and from their side.
So one of the solutions that are being put on the table in terms of addressing the shortcomings of the accounting fraternity, because it's not limited to South Africa alone, it would seem. Globally, it looks like the accountants are not what they used to be. And people are saying that that's as a result of the industry taking on too many tasks at once. Yeah. There's a growing call to split accounting or auditing services from your consulting services, and there is a belief or a view that doing so will, make things a lot cleaner, reduce any conflict of interest or any temptation to, give a good audit when one shouldn't be given. How do you respond to that? Do you think that this could be the solution?
Well, for a number of years now, from the time when I participated in the drafting of the Audit Profession Act, this is an issue that's been debated, people looking at the pros and cons. There is no solution, one solution that normally solves all problems, but there has been a lot of case made for that separation. Obviously, when you think about the possibility of that having a bearing on a person's opinion, as a result of that person wanting to make sure that he doesn't lose the other more lucrative assignments, there is a reasonable case in that regard. Whether it will solve the problems, really, that's a question that remains to be seen. But I think there will be a lot of readjustment in the market. Audit fees will, of necessity, go up because all of a sudden, I mean, even in the UK, in South Africa, you've got about 4,500 auditors, and you've got a few trillion rands worth of economy. So all of a sudden, once those functions are separated, I think the value of the auditing function will probably really shoot up. So yes, it's likely that over a period of time, the market forces will correct itself, and you will find that auditing firms will be able to survive on audit alone. But it's a question that we don't know until we get to that point. And if we have to do that, we've got to be very, very measured in the manner in which we do it. As it stands today, one of the 5 principles in the Code of Professional Conduct is about professional competence. Mm-hmm. And one of them is also about objectivity. And one of the issues about objectivity is for an auditor to make sure that you take reasonable steps to make sure that there is no external influence on your opinion as an auditor. So, well, people say that's self-regulation. But the point I'm making is that the profession has always anticipated the possibility that somebody's opinion could be influenced by external factors. And as one of the requirements in the Code of Professional Conduct is that a person who is in that position has got to take steps to ensure that that doesn't happen. And to the extent that that happens, we've got to be able to respond appropriately by disciplining those that are not observing that.
All right, Freeman, another solution right now that is happening in the industry is that of mandatory audit rotation. Yes. And we have seen a number of companies on the JSC, get ready for that to make sure that they're, compliant by the time that law really kicks in.
Yes.
Although I am told that there are instances, because often you'll see when a JSC listed company, changes an auditor, they'll make an announcement on this regard. It's of public interest. But what we don't know as the public is those instances when an auditor refuses a certain client or refuses to take up that job because of obviously having gone through the numbers, finding something fishy and saying that no, we can't do this. I am told that there's a number of these cases whereby certain companies have been turned down by your big 4, the big 5 audit companies, yet this information is not made public. I mean, do you think that there is a case to be made that it should be named public? We should know the companies from get-go whose numbers aren't sticking up.
Well, the question is whose responsibility that would be. First and foremost, as professionals, we have earned our reputation primarily because we respect the confidentiality of the information of our clients. And that's one of the cornerstones of this profession. Now, where do the checks and balances come in? If I refuse a client and because there are really serious issues of integrity, in terms of the dispensation as it stands today, it should be difficult for that client to find another auditor. And if that client can't find people to audit them because they are not adhering to good business practices, it's going to be difficult for those clients to get in, for that business to get investors. And because you can't get investors, you can't be in business. So there are other mechanisms that in the manner in which the economy functions that deals with those issues. I don't think it would be fair to put that responsibility on an accountant or on an auditor, unless, of course, and this is regulated already in the Audit Profession Act, unless, of course, an auditor in the course of audit picks up that there are irregularities that ought to be brought to the attention of regulators. There is a regulation to that effect. So to the extent that material irregularities or reportable irregularities, as it is called in the Audit Profession Act, are happening in corporates, that is already prescribed to be reported accordingly. So the point is that, one, there is confidentiality to the extent that I refuse to take a client for certain reasons, but another auditor can ask me why I refuse. And the reasons for which I refuse should be the same reasons that the next auditor will refuse. Okay. So essentially, the market forces will deal with that. So there's confidentiality issues that we need to respect. At the same time, to the extent that such issues arise out of an audit process, then there is a legal obligation to report those. Okay.
And just finally, I mean, going back to the point where we started around Steinhoff, and looking at the audit firm involved or implicated or, found to have not done their job properly, we can't not mention Deloitte. Help me understand, as SAICA, what you did about that information that, Deloitte had for years and years signed off on the financial statements of Steinhoff that are now have found to have been, rejigged in many ways. Do you, as SAICA, believe that there was a way in which Deloitte should have known and should have been able to pick up the mishaps in those numbers a lot sooner? And just to add to that, if so, what recourse is SAICA taking on Deloitte?
No, Fifi, on that particular issue, it would be ERBA that deals with Deloitte in their capacity as registered auditors. Whatever views we have as SAICA would not be able to act in any way. But to the extent that members of the board of Steinhoff are members of SAICA, to the extent that members of the audit committee of Steinhoff are members of SAICA, to the extent that Lagrange as well as Yoste are members of SAICA, that's the area in which we as SAICA would be responsible. But in as far as the audit firm is concerned, that would be ERBA.
That would be ERBA.
Yes.
Freeman, thank you so much for your time. I mean, I do think that we will continue to engage, particularly when you hopefully get the PwC report and you do take your next action and next steps against those implicated. But we'll leave the interview there.
Fifi, we will engage when we have finalized the matter. Once we get the report, we won't deal with a specific case.
Well, let's hope that finalization will be a really speedy recovery, yes, or a speedy finalization process on that regard. Guys, thanks so much for watching. I was in conversation with the CEO of SAICA about, his job to restore the integrity of South Africa's accounting fraternity, about the action that them as a body plan to take on Steinhoff and the implicated individuals there on that regard. Of course, we know that the story is far from over, but the program is over now. Thanks for tuning in and catch up next time.